People always ask me, Miles, if you had $1 million and could only put it into one stock, what would it be? To which I always say, Nikola. To which they then ask, then what would your number 2 stock be? Which I tell them is easily Palantir. All jokes aside though, Palantir is without a doubt my highest conviction stock right now that I think is going to make me a lot of money in the future. And lest we forget that Palantir was one of the darlings of Wall Street bets back in the day when it first IPO'd. As you guys know, growth stocks have slowly been starting to make their recovery. It seems like some of the initial fears in the market have been shaken, and a lot of these growth stocks are starting to see more green days. And one of these growth stocks is of course Palantir. Now, the purpose of this video is not to discuss what Palantir does, because I've already done that, but rather this video is more aimed at where I can see Palantir going in the future and why I continue to love this company even more and more. And honestly, let's say by this point you're someone who either has no shares or maybe has a small position in Palantir. This video, more or less, might end up convincing you to either add to your position or hopefully start one. And at the end of this video, I'm also going to discuss the potential for a gamma squeeze in Palantir. Okay, so in short, I believe Palantir to be one of the most criminally undervalued stocks in the market right now. With a market cap of about 46 billion and a share price that's been hovering in the $20 range for quite a while now, Palantir is one of those rare stocks that I can see not only 10xing, but potentially 20xing in price several years from now, which would bring this stock up to the $500 price range. And with all the recent contracts, deals, and continued growth in revenue, I am more bullish on Palantir than ever before. And look, I know there's a lot of hype around this stock, at least to a certain extent, but you have to understand, Palantir is in a pretty solid looking position right now. All it's going to take to get this stock moving even more is once the big money and institutional investors pile in, because as of right now, Palantir is mostly a retail-owned company, meaning a majority of Palantir buyers in this stock are people like you and me. Roughly 85% is owned by retail investors, and the remaining 15% is owned by institutions, which is actually similar to Tesla stock back in the day. But that's not going to last forever, which is why now more than ever is a good time to start a position in this company. People always say things like, man, I wish I invested in Apple when it was still young, or
I wish I had invested in Tesla back in 2016.
And, well, now's your chance to own some shares in Palantir before it takes off. And remember, Alex Karp, the co-founder and CEO of Palantir, says his company will become the most important software company in the world. And I think in time, Wall Street is eventually going to take note of Palantir and the stock will start to rise and hit new highs. I'm not saying that'll happen tomorrow or even next week, but I have very little doubts that it will happen. And even though part of me hates to make this comparison, I think Palantir might end up playing out very similarly to Tesla stock, like I'd mentioned, meaning very retail heavy in the beginning with not a lot of interest from institutions. And then once people begin to understand the business and realize the importance of what Palantir is actually offering, it will skyrocket. Which brings me to my next point. Palantir, along with Snowflake, was actually recently added to the Russell 3000 index, which is one of the broadest indexes for the US stock market, measuring the performance of the 3,000 largest publicly held companies. Now, some of you might be asking, okay, what's the big deal? Well, as you can imagine, an index this large is bound to have a ton of smart money tied up with it. There are trillions of dollars within this index, meaning that now that Palantir is a part of it, I think we're easily going to see billions of dollars of institutional money flow into Palantir stock alone. But with all that said, we will not know the full effect that this will have on Palantir until the actual addition of it to the Russell, And if all this wasn't enough, at the end of May, Palantir was awarded a $111 million contract to provide mission command platform for the United States Special Operation Command. And look, I get that one of Palantir's biggest criticisms right now is that they are too reliant on government contracts, to which I would say, who cares? If 2020 taught us anything, it's that the US government can basically print money whenever it wants. I'm being a bit hyperbole, but I think you get the point. If the government needs more funding to pay Palantir for their services, they can make it happen. And despite all these government contracts, I think over the coming years, we're going to see Palantir making their way into the commercial space. And who knows, perhaps eventually into the lives of each of us on an individual level. What this will exactly look like, I'm not sure, but it's definitely a possibility. So on to the final portion that I want to discuss, the potential for a gamma squeeze. If you look at Palantir, you can pretty quickly find out that it's not really that shorted of a company, so there's not a very good chance for a short squeeze. There is, however, a huge amount of open call options, and keep in mind that each call option is a contract to buy 100 shares, and over time, the more that these contracts become in the money, the higher the potential for a gamma squeeze. And if you don't know what a gamma squeeze is, it basically happens when all of the traders who have sold call options are forced to cover their calls by buying shares of the stock, which can in turn drive up the price of the underlying stock, which can then lead to even more options being in the money, which can force even more contract sellers to cover their positions. Now, does this mean that we're going to see a huge gamma squeeze in Palantir like we've been seeing in AMC? Well, not necessarily, but regardless, the potential for a gamma squeeze shouldn't be underestimated. And who knows, even though Palantir used to be a meme stock under the degenerates of Wall Street bets, we could see Palantir rise as another meme stock again. And while Palantir's ticker mentions on Wall Street bets haven't been nearly as much as, say, AMC or Clover, it's definitely risen a bit over the last few weeks. And at the end of the day, despite how much fun it would be if Palantir actually became a meme stock again, this is a company that I am very long in. I don't plan on selling any Palantir shares for at least 10 years out, and maybe even longer. Palantir is a solid company with great fundamentals that I think just might have what it takes to be the most important software company in the world. Anyway, thanks for listening to my love letter to Palantir, and I'll see you in the next video.